order the Kingston Springs Beer Board meeting for August 19th, 2021. John, could you please call the roll?
Carolyn Clark.
Here.
Josh Etherly.
Here.
Tony Gross.
Here.
Mike Hargis.
Here.
Lynn Ritter.
Here. All right, we have a quorum. Do we have a motion to approve the May 20th, 2021 Beer Board meeting minutes?
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes. Item 5 is a motion to approve the August 19th, 2021 Beer Board meeting agenda. Any additions, changes? Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item A is a motion to approve a special event beer permit application for Amy and Cole Ruth at Sky King Pizza.
This special event permit, it's a request from the beer service related to Dinner on Main event.
We're good.
Related to what, John? I'm sorry.
Dinner on Main.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Motion to approve.
Move second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Item B is a motion to waive the special event permit application fee. Dinner on Main, I assume.
Yes, this Dinner on Main is a fundraising event for the Kingston Springs Parks and Farmers and Artisans Market. Staff is requesting from the board to waive the $250 permit fee.
Motion to waive.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right. Item C is a motion to approve the beer permit application for White Rock Restaurant Incorporated, 132 Petro Road, Kingston Springs, Tennessee.
Yeah, so an application was received for a beer sales permit for White Rock Restaurants, known locally as Punjabi Dhaba Restaurants. All required permit information has been received, and I believe Martin Brook has some additional follow-up information.
Everything has been completely filled out, so
Okay.
satisfied.
Satisfied.
That's great.
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Item D is underage sales violation of Thornton's LLC, 120 Levin Hills Road, Kingston Springs, Tennessee. Kingston Springs beer permit number 6-2-2019-1.
On May 21st, 2021, the Cheatham County Sheriff's Office conducted an underage beer buy operation across Cheatham County. During this operation, a customer at Kingston Springs, Thornton's located at 120 Lumen Hills Road, allowed purchase of an alcoholic beverage to an underage patron. The establishment was notified of the violation by the Cheatham County Sheriff's Office, and the clerk was issued a citation to appear in General Sessions Court. The disposition of that appearance is a rescheduled court date of November 10th. But I believe our city attorney has additional guidance, and there is a representative of the business to speak as well.
So the representative of the business wants to go ahead and.
Sure.
So we were aware of the situation. I guess just kind of recap what our policy is, what our process is. Scott Morgan, sorry, Region Manager. Our policy is that the company policy was required at 140. The Tennessee policy is we're a car all state. So in our situation is under new hire, we have the restricted sales training. It's completed within the first 10 days of hire. That was completed on this team member. In our POS system and our checks and balances, you have to actually enter a date of birth to complete the sale. Obviously, we were expecting that would be the date of birth that's on the ID. Unfortunately, in this case here, there was something that happened that didn't check that box. Team member was terminated, and all team members at their current location are going through the restricted sales training again. So we're trying to go back and make sure that the same situation doesn't present itself. And we also use a third party to do our own audits on these situations, and we do quite well in that, which is meant to create the muscle memory to avoid the situation that we're in currently. So those are really what we try to do on our end to ensure that the situation doesn't occur. Open to questions, thoughts, on what I might have missed.
And I don't know if you said it, this is the first, just for the record, this is the first.
Correct, this is the first offense for this location.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Gentlemen and ladies, if I could kind of brief you a little bit on, I know you had a copy of our Title 8 section with respect to beer board duties and civil penalties and all. There are additional statutory provisions that govern penalties should you find that the offense of selling to minors occurred in this situation. If a vendor is deemed and has earned the title of responsible vendor by going through all of the state requirements, and the clerk had their certification, and maintained that, or was within 61 days of hire, then state law prohibits you from suspending their, or revoking their beer permit, and it limits the fine to no more than $1,000. So my understanding is we have been unable to get the information from the state of Tennessee to confirm that they are responsible. I assume Clay Thornton's probably is a responsible vendor.
It's a great question. So, we only have 16 locations here in Tennessee. I'm really not sure that the company is aware of what the Tennessee Responsible Vendor Program is. I am, because I've been here for many years, and it's not the first place I've worked when it comes to this process, but
Sure.
it was one of my questions as well.
Sure.
And I was brought in the loop on this just a few days ago, actually. So,
We apparently, you have to actually submit a public information request.
That's what we found out.
Rather than us, to actually get the information about whether or not they're a responsible vendor, rather than providing that to the municipalities that are enforcing it. But, you know, here nor there, your options tonight are, if you determine that this violation occurred, you could either table this as far as a penalty until such time as you're able to verify, do they meet all requirements in order to give the benefit of the responsible vendor provisions? Or you could go ahead and hand down a sentence, if you will, tonight, at a level no higher than it would be if they were responsible vendor. So that would be the two options, two choices I would see. You will need to actually have a finding that the offense occurred, and then you would have a recommendation as to the penalty.
And I believe precedence is in $500
On the first offense.
for a first offense, correct?
Yeah.
So that would fall under the 1,000 anyway, so I don't see a need to wait or table.
Yeah, I think that we could probably take care of this at this meeting.
Correct.
I don't think that the suspension of license was really
No.
on the radar, so.
Unless Gordon has an objection to that.
no, I'm not objecting.
Okay. Well, then.
So the recommendation on precedence would be $500
Yeah.
for first offense, and then
Yeah, you make a motion to.
I would motion that we fine Gordon's $500 upon the finding of the offense.
Motion that the clerk be found to have made the underage sale, and then the fine for that be $500 first offense.
Okay. Motion that the clerk was at fault on Thornton's, and we're going to fine $500.
Second.
Right, should we call roll on this one?
Tony, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Do we still need to find out the information on the vendor, on the responsible vendor program? Do we still need to get that?
So the responsible vendor thing would, and correct me if I'm wrong, would only be if we were looking to suspend their license, because that would protect them from having a suspension, and we're not even, typically, unless you got something.
I said, no, that's something
That-
we can have, just have to know it.
Yeah, yeah, so if they had that, they would still be, a fine could still be applied to them even if they have a responsible vendor, but
Up
you
to
could,
$1,000.
up to $1,000, but their license could not be suspended, so it's just, am I missing anything?
So is that something else that they need to achieve?
Well, it's a-
I'm sure
it's
he'll-
They probably like
I
it.
don't think it's a requirement, it's something that should be strongly suggested for me.
Right.
Because there are some protections, as you guys are reviewing here, there are some protections when, when you do get to a situation where you got, which we don't want to be in that situation, if it was a more than a first offense or a second or third or something of that nature, so. And as we're expanding, it's just very smart of us to familiarize ourselves with some different things that are. We're headquartered out of Louisville, more experts on what's going on in Kentucky than what's going on in Tennessee, but I'm very familiar with Tennessee responsible vendor and, sure.
And I think also probably the responsible vendor is a fluid thing, right? So even if we got their responsible vendor, it may not apply to possibly a second offense later on down the road. So it's really not a,
You
not a
also
reason.
have to verify the clerk is
Correct,
properly certified.
correct. So,
as well.
I mean, they need to do it, but we don't need it.
And the Beer Board does have to report back to the ABC this month, so that the state does keep track.
Sounds good.
Sounds exactly the way I know it, so.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? John, would you please call the roll?
Carolyn Clark,
Yes.
Josh Etherly.
Yes.
Tony Gross,
Yes.
Mike Hargis.
Yes.
Glenn Ritter.
Yes. All right, motion passes. Thank you. All right. All right, item E is underage sales violation due to Southern Service, number 13, 129 Lavin Hills Road, Kingston Springs, Tennessee, Kingston Springs Beer Permit 3-19-2020-1. Is there anyone here? Southern Service?
Yes, I'm Steve Gladwell, District Manager with TriStar, and we are members of the Responsible Vendors Act. Our policy is that every employee, every day, when they arrive, they sign, they're aware of our policy, how we ID people. Every month we have signed the Responsible Vendor Act again, so we're pretty strict about how we operate selling alcohol. I'm a little confused about this whole issue, because normally when there's a beer sting and if we fail it, they immediately call, and they come in, and the officer presents himself as the receipt, says this was the ID, this is what you put in. None of that happened. It was about 4 hours later that the officer came back to the store and asked the cashier to print out the receipt. So he did, and then said that he sold to a minor. So I didn't know anything about it. They called, of course, that night and said, hey, we failed the beer sting. So I went in, looked at the video, watched the cashier, look at the ID, type in the date. I had to go through our system and pull up the receipt. And he put in 1/15/2000, which would make him 21. I've never seen, I don't know if that was the date or it wasn't the date. The cashier insisted it was. We terminated him anyway. That's our policy. I'm just a little confused as to why they waited 4 hours to come back to the store. But at this point, it's neither here nor there, other than it just seemed like it's odd the way the whole event went down that night. Because normally I get called immediately, I go down to the store, we terminate the employee on the spot.
Because it happens so often?
Oh, no, it never. In 12 years, it happened to me once, that's the normal, that was in Nashville, that's the normal process. So, I'm just a little, it was just very odd how the whole thing went down. We don't have any documentation other than, I pulled this receipt that showed 1/5/1/15/2000, which is what the cashier said, yeah, that's what the license said, that's what I put in, so.
So, again, on this situation, he has affirmed that he's responsible vendor. We've not been able to verify that with the state or what the clerk's status was. Since there has not been a disposition court, the board can wait to see if you want to table this, wait to see what the disposition is. Or you're an independent judiciary, quasi-judiciary body right now, so you can make your own determination based upon the evidence before you, which is the letter from the county sheriff's department and the testimony from the representative from Southern Service. Like the other case, again, and if you're a responsible vendor, you can do no more than $1,000 in a fine. Or you can table it, wait until we get further information.
Just first offense.
First offense
Yes.
at this location under this ownership.
So that counts as first offense.
I would say, I was thinking this would be hard because we just did that, but there was an admission of guilt on the first one. So this is a little bit different because I don't really count that as an admission.
And it's my understanding that the employee has a court date of September 9th. He's done a, what's it called?
Pre-trial diversion.
Pre-trial diversion. And so he's met with the district attorney to do that process, I'm not sure, I'm not real familiar with how that works.
So it's, again, would be your pleasure if you could table this and await the outcome after that hearing and make your determination as to guilt or innocence, if you will. Or you can make that finding tonight based upon the evidence before this body. Awaiting the outcome from the judge, it would, you're not letting him decide for you. That would be additional evidence for you all to table.
It would seem to me that I hate to ask you to come back again, once the case has been heard, but certainly have a chance to hear what the judge has to say.
I wish I had original receipt or saw the license or had some way of verifying the guy who really did this, but according to my receipt, he put in the proper date, that's the date he said it was on a license.
Well, it wouldn't be much of a test if they went in there and had an ID that said it was 21.
Right.
I mean, logically, that would make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't seem right.
So I'm gonna guess that when he gets there, that they're gonna, the sheriff's department's gonna probably have evidence that it
Right.
wasn't 20. I mean, it wasn't 2,000.
Right.
I mean, I'm just guessing here, but and as far as when they did it, they're probably checking every establishment in the south end of the county all at the same time. Again, I'm not trying to speak from them, but
Right.
it sounds like they did. They went to Thornton's, probably Community Mart, probably Matco, and any place else. So it would take a little while to get around to all of them and run their test, So
Well, I mean,
that's just a
usually when they're
guess
out-
on my part. I'm not a sheriff deputy, so I got no idea.
It was just strange to me that when I
Yeah.
got down there, where's the
Well,
citation? We didn't get a
I
citation. or
understand that
anything.
thought. I guess that'd be the other side of the thought, was they probably checked them all before they violated anybody.
Can we make a motion, and that motion based on a guilty verdict or not this time?
Hey,
It'd be a tech.
Just a-
Well, you could make to table it, but like Rutherford said, it would be, the guilty verdict would just be additional evidence provided to us.
You still need
It
to
wouldn't
hear.
be, we can't, it doesn't make our determination. I assume that be.
Yeah.
So, depending on what the pleasure of the board is, we could table this or, there's also the highly likely probability that the sheriff's department wasn't using an incorrect ID, using
Right.
an ID. I mean, I
you
Same.
have a motion? You have a motion?
Go ahead. Go ahead, John.
I motion to table and wait till the court.
Second.
all in favor, or John, call roll?
Carolyn Clark,
Yes.
Josh Heatherly.
Yes.
Tony Gross,
Yes.
Mike Hargis.
Yes.
Glenn Rivers.
Yes.
And then I would suggest that you do a motion to reset this for hearing. Maybe
October?
I was gonna say October, that way if they don't hit that September before, then
Yeah.
you've got a little bit of time in there.
Okay with you?
Yes, that's fine. And so what I would need to do is make sure that I find out what the ruling is.
We would,
We'll-
we'll get that
we'll
information.
Look at that information, okay. All right, thank you.
So,
We have a motion to,
Motion to.
Before you adjourn, could I address the board, please?
there's really,
Is there community?
could you address the board and the commission meeting?
Well, this concerns beer permits. I'm just gonna give you some insight, being with the industry.
We don't have to respond.
Yeah, it's, I guess,
We need to finish.
It's just a brief statement, and I wasn't gonna do it, but I attend many beer board meetings throughout Middle Tennessee, because that's part of my job. The favored vendor, as Martha Brooke explained, is really, the intention of that is more for larger cities where they have a lot of people, and it protects the company so that they don't lose the permit and they can continue to do business. We have so few around here that I think it's good that they do that. I think everybody ought to do it. And the last thing is that when I think, my opinion, and I see it in other boards, if you're gonna have a beer board hearing, you should have the deputies come and have them here too, so that they can present their evidence In this case right here, you know, they're saying they have a receipt that says so-and-so. Well, and the other thing I heard is that the sheriff's department didn't contact these people. The employees contacted them many hours later. I do understand in a small community, phones start ringing. They're out here, and I'm not against that. But then they didn't hear anything about this meeting, from what I understood, until months later. So that might be looked into. I'm just trying to bring some questions up that I heard. We're, as an industry representative, we're totally against selling to minors. And there's other things that should be checked as well. Do we check for cigarettes? Should. Lottery? Should. I'm concerned about a lot of these, and I think we all should be that. But I think these companies have represented that they do their best to do it. I think that there was just a little miscommunication with it. And I think we should mention that to the sheriff.
I didn't know about this until I got the letter on 30th of July. It happened after May.
Motion to move this
To
next
October.
hearing to the October hearing.
I'm sorry, I interrupted it wrong.
Do we have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, Keith.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, meeting adjourned. If anybody was here just for the beer board and would like to leave, this would be a great time unless you.
I'm sorry, I interrupted it at the wrong time. I apologize, but you know I'm just letting it go.
That's all right.
Tomorrow.
I'll be back here tomorrow.
Tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock.
I'll be around.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next item is the public hearing. I think everybody's signed into the public hearing that's coming up right now, so we'll go to call the public hearing to order for the Kingston Springs Board of Commission for August 19th, 2021. The only item on it is open public comments on consideration and recommendation of the coordinating committee concerning updates to the Cheatham County Joint Growth Plan of Town of Kingston Springs. Growth Plan in Tennessee is legislated in Public Chapter 1101 and in Tennessee Code annotated 6-58-101 through 6-58-118. Is there anyone here to speak on this? Everybody here for the public hearing? All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we'll call the Kingston Springs Board of Commission meeting to order. Could everyone please rise and face the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. John, please call the roll.
Carolyn Clark. Josh Adderley. Here. Tony Grove.
Here.
Mike Farkas. Here. Lynn Reynolds.
Here. We have a quorum. Do we have a motion to approve the July 15th, 2021 City Commission meeting minutes?
Make a motion to approve the July 15th minutes.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Motion, actually, I would like to add one item to this. I'd like to add as item I suppose it is, to new business, appointment to the Board of Zoning Appeals. I'm thinking appointment to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Do we have a motion to approve the August 19th, 2021 City Commission meeting agenda? Amended.
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Passes. All right, announcements from commissioners? What?
Thanks to the Kingston Springs Volunteer Fire Department for attending the back to school bash in the tea room. That was quite a hit, and very thankful for the volunteers that stepped up.
Josh?
No.
Mike? All right. Community input and concerns. Looks like we've got some community here, maybe with some input and concerns. If you'd like to address the commission, just step up to the podium right there, state your name and address, and you're free to speak. Hold up a second, come here.
Oh, you can go ahead, sir.
Go ahead.
Sure. Well,
Sit
thank
He
you.
talks to us all the time.
Oh, okay.
You bet.
You gonna give me a chance then, huh? Never done this before. My name is Maria Keller. My address is 1251 Mount Pleasant Road. However, I am also have family on another street that I'll be talking about tonight. So I'm here this evening. I'm a concerned citizen of this community, and to inform you, the residents of this community are requesting speed bumps to be installed on Hillcrest Road and Walnut Drive. These streets have become unsafe for the families, especially with the children that call this neighborhood home. They play, walk, ride bikes, etc. Unfortunately, some citizens have chosen to make these two streets their personal racetrack, and they have been asked to slow down. Cops are aware, and there's nothing they can do because they get released as soon as they go to jail, or they cannot arrest them because the judge and DA are refusing to lock them up for misdemeanors or even repeat offenses. I understand some believe COVID is an issue and overcrowding. I get it. However, that's a solution that protects the criminals and leaves the law-abiding residents to deal with them, which is a recipe for disaster. We have always been told, and it's even on the back of TC's patrol car, see something, say something. Well, I have, and so has these 40 law-abiding citizens of this neighborhood. I want to thank Captain Bond for his concern and commitment to place a radar in the neighborhood, although it won't stop them who consider it reckless trying to wreak havoc. It will help remind all that we do have a speed limit here. At least this is a start until we can get speed bumps installed. We appreciate any assistance to remedy this issue. That is a safety concern for us all. This has been an issue for years that's only getting worse. Most are sick of it. So if speed bumps could prevent one injury, save one life, it wouldn't that be worth the money? Sincerely, me, Rhonda Keller. So, I do have signatures here. I don't know if I need to give them to somebody. I don't know how this works, to be honest.
Yeah, do
Okay.
put it on.
You
It'd
just
be great.
take all of that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do I speak away?
Yeah, we don't really, in this public forum, the commission's not really supposed to address you back. It's just kind of a public forum, but maybe when we get the police department reports in a little bit here, we can discuss it as a board since you brought it up.
Okay, would I need to stay for that, or?
Well, if you're interested in hearing what we say, yes.
Yes, all right,
Okay.
thank you.
That's coming up real soon. so
Okay,
we
thank
can
you.
go on. Okay. Would anyone else like to address the commission?
Go ahead.
I see mostly familiar faces here. My name's Tony Campbell, and I've been coming to these meetings since 1977, I think. Anyhow, I want to touch base on a couple things. I want to commend the codes people for the work that's been done. There's 2 or 3 properties that I've been after the commission, the city manager, the codes people for I don't know how many years, numerous years, and nothing has ever happened. It's finally, things are starting to happen, and they're getting some of this property cleaned out. It's a real problem for the people that live there, try to keep their property up, and to have neighbors that don't. And I think it's the obligation of the city commission to enforce those rules and regulations. I hope you will in the future. Any questions?
Thank you, Ted.
Hello, my name is Melinda Patterson. I live at 1061 Patterson Drive. I've been a lifelong resident of Kingston Springs. Matter of fact, I was in the first graduating class at Harvard High School. I'd like to address the codes department that never had to deal with before until this year. On July the 8th, I was not at home. I live with my dad. Henry Patterson lives at 1061 Patterson Drive. My sister also lives there with us. She is disabled. On June the 8th, I wasn't at home, but my dad and sister were there, and they received a visit from the codes official, Mr. and Miss Armstrong. And it was at an inconvenient time. My dad was trying to cook pork chop, and there was a broken coffee pot on the floor. And my sister just simply asked them if they could come back before that they could get that cleaned up and there would be no safety issues. She was more concerned about their safety than her own. If my sister would have fell in the coffee that was on the floor, if she fell, it could have possibly killed her. She's got a spinal cord injury. And if my 78-year-old dad would have fell in that coffee, you know, that could have been a life-threatening manner as well. I feel that whenever they asked them to come back, it, you know, wouldn't have been a long delay, just long enough for them to get everything cleaned up, that would have been sufficient, but Sharon demanded at that time to go ahead and proceed to the shed. So she came into the kitchen, turned the stove off. Right there, that was wrong. They should have left and give them time to clean up. In the immediate rush, you know, if she would have fell, like I said, that would have caused her a major physical problem. And at that point, I feel that they were trespassing. They should have just conducted business in a more friendly way. I felt that the way they approached it was forceful and intimidating. To demand to see my storage building where I keep my private things, and I hang out from time to time as you need to when you're doing caregiving for 2 people and working full time. They went in and took pictures of my things, and the violation was saying that it wasn't habitable for human occupancy. I understand that. And I feel that that was an alleged violation. I don't really live in my storage shed. I have a bed out there with a dresser and a lot of medical equipment and stuff that we've had to have over the years. I do all my cooking, cleaning, anything like that needs to be done up at the house. I do that there. So I'm not here to fuss about the living arrangements. I just felt that it was handled in a wrong way. And I understand on their part that they're saying that this was a safety issue regarding me. So they handed out the violation. And then, before it was over with, they offered some kind of charitable information towards my dad's housing situation. It's not in the best situation. It's probably, if not the oldest place on Patterson Drive, so it doesn't look real good. But I kind of just felt that that was like a dog chasing its tail. You come to violate somebody and then I offer them help on their house. Then on the 14th, I received a voicemail from Mr. Armstrong saying kind of things in an intimidating way. And one of the things that he said was, I'm sure you don't want to cause your dad any trouble, you should just comply. So I felt that that was bullying and intimidating, kind of old school intimidation. On the 22nd, Mr. Armstrong came by my house and talked to my dad, and I wasn't there again, I was at work. One thing in particular I'd like to mention about that visit, Mr. Armstrong told him, my dad, that if I had threatened my neighbor that I would be in court. Okay, that was wrong. First of all, if there was such a report, why didn't the police come and give me that report? And number 2, I've never made any kind of threats to my neighbors, not ever. So at that time, my dad and my sister and I felt like the Armstrongs were not welcome over at our property anymore. And my sister and myself, we've been beside ourselves ever since this happened. We don't have any answers. It's been over a month. I don't know if I'm even able to stay there at this point. I do have a room in the house. I'm not exactly sure what I need to do. It's just been a lack of information. So sometime after that, on a Saturday morning, when I finally had gotten time to call Mr. Armstrong, I was doing so to request more time. And to, let me back up. I was calling that morning to ask for more time and extension, and he wanted to know why and what the difference between his date of compliance was and the date that I requested. I believe it was around the 15th of August that I asked for an extension. I said, oh, about 15 days is the difference. I just need some time. The violation letter stated that I could ask for more time. However, it did not state that I had to give an acceptable reason to Mr. Armstrong. He wouldn't give me an answer that day on the phone, so I just asked him, are you not going to give me an extension? He said, Miss Patterson, I never said that. The call was more like a tug of war. I told him that we would come down to City Hall on Tuesday and to get these unknown papers to see what these were about. So the following Tuesday, I came down with my dad, and Miss Clark came with us, and we were wanting to find out what these papers were about and to get an answer whether I had an extension or not. It was another tug of war. Here we were discussing things that had already happened, and all I was here for was to find out about what these papers were. And things didn't get any better. It was just bickering back and forth, and in fact, we were even called names. At the end of trying to just get out of there because nothing was getting accomplished other than some charitable information, not any answers to an extension, it was established that Mr. and Mrs. Armstrong's presence were not allowed on our property at that time. That's not the outcome I wanted at that meeting, but that's for the gist of what happened. Well, about a week later, Mr. Armstrong came by my house to talk to me, to ask me if I had received a certified letter. I replied no. He said, did your dad understand the charitable papers that I gave him? And I said yes. The man was visibly nervous and he was visibly shaken. Me and being alone outside, I said nothing more, and I just went inside. I feel that that was trespassing. Again, he had no business being there. When you get a certified letter, it's my understanding that they take off that little thing and then they send it back to whoever sent it. And that notifies them that that the person on the other end has received the letter. And at that point, I feel with him showing up and acting the way he did, nervous, asking questions, that was another intimidation tactic. Why does a couple from Russellville, Kentucky work for Kingston Springs in the first place? Finally, taking matters into my own hands, being frustrated, I drafted a letter. I delivered it to the city saying I complied to the alleged violation, that I considered the case closed, and to call me if there were any questions. I received no documentation, no letter of any sort, nothing, no answers, but every bit of trouble, just like the voicemail said, that Mr. Armstrong left me around the 14th of July. I'm sorry I'm taking up so much time. This is just really hit home. I find it shameful when the lack of morals override the law, and that's okay. Kingston Springs, not Franklin, it's not Brentwood, it's not Belmead. We need no organization or governing what's in our sheds, how much time we spend in them, what type of flower beds we can have, or how tall our weeds have to be, or even that we can't even park an RV in our family's place when we need to do a little caregiving. But we're considering having an RV park in a residential area. Sounds like another dog chasing its tail. I still have no answers. I was told before, whenever I first bought this shed, I called the city. I asked if I needed a permit, and I was told that I didn't need a permit. And I definitely would have gotten a permit if it would have been stated at the time. I want to spend all that money on a building and done everything I did to try to take care of my parent and my sister and all that. I would have found another way to do that. We always try to do what we can for our town, our people. We try to be a law-abiding citizens. We don't bother anybody. We want peace. We want to be able to get along with our neighbors. We want a city that's run by people who live here, know our citizens, and care about them. The more obligations we have to each other, whether we're an authority or not, we all need to do what's best for our citizens, not make a hard situation more difficult for our elderly and our disabled citizens. I'm not asking for special treatment. I just think that the city needs to be ran in a more efficient way where people can understand, people that live here and that know us. This is not the place I grew up. It's nothing like it used to be, and I understand change is always going to be a part of our life. Now I could say, you know, I used to be happy to say I was from Kingston Springs, and I seen strangers in town, and I said, welcome to Kingston Springs. You know, it's glad to have them here. I'm not feeling that anymore. I'm really upset at how my sister and my dad were treated. Now I'm ashamed to even say this, but I don't think it's a place to raise your kids. I don't think it's a place you help your disabled or your elderly fathers, mothers, grandparents. I hate to say this, but this is a fiasco. The city's pretty to look at on the outside, but on the inside, it's looking pretty uncaring and underhanded. I hope things that can change. I hope that people don't have to go through the long, over a month and a half of suffering, not knowing. My dad's 78 years old. He's worried about what he's going to do for caregiving and where I'm going to be. So I want y'all to consider who we got running these coast departments and how they're handled. And during this treatment, it's made me wonder how other many people's been intimidated as well and how they've been treated. Just on a simple violation, something that could be recommended by asking questions instead of going in and bullying somebody in their own house. My great-grandfather used to live here, my great-grandmother, my grandfather, my dad, me, my nephews. And standing here looking at y'all, some of y'all feel comfortable with, a lot of y'all, I don't know, I'm getting these glares, it's making me a little nervous. I just want to see a solution to all these problems. The beer thing's not a big deal to me. I understand we need to grow and that type of thing, but maybe more consideration needs to be given to morals running this town. Like I say, when the morals are overriding the law, or the bad morals are overriding the law, and that's okay, that's shameful. And that's all I got to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the discussion? Salute to you.
I promise I'll be quick. My name's Mike Russell, and I'm the solid waste director here in Cheatham County, and I actually came over, visited with you guys last year. And, you know, I have to say this. You know, my parents brought us here in 1972, so I grew up here. And when I get within the city limits, memories just start flooding back from the old school on the hill. And, you know, I noticed he has Eugene on his shirt. Well, I thought it was Bubba. I didn't know. So got a lot of great memories here. But I came because I've been kind of making a little tour. We've got a couple of big events coming up in the solid waste world in October, and we're just asking for y'all's support in just promoting these 2 dates. Okay, I've already talked with John, and John's actually put it up on y'all's Facebook pages. And we've gone around to, I've been to Ashland City, I've been to Pleasant Views, I've been to our county commission, and then a week from now I'm going to go to Pegram. But we've got 2 events. One is the Household Hazardous Waste Day, and we're bringing it back. It will be October the 9th, and it's going to be at Sycamore Square in Ashland City. We were only allowed 1 this year because of the COVID. We're hoping to have 2 next year, where we would have 1 in the spring on our side of the river and then have 1 there in the fall. But this is our first one, and it'll be at Sycamore Square from 8 to 12. On the website, It shows all the things that they can bring that day. It's, you know, you can bring gas, you can bring pesticides, you can bring any kind of cleaning stuff you want to get rid of that you normally can't throw away. But, and then we have brought back, which I'm really excited about, is we brought back a free dump day for all the residents. And so what we've done is, instead of having the whole county one day, we broke it up into 3 weeks. So on October 2nd, that will be Kingston Springs, Pegram, or the south side of Cheatham County will be able to come and whatever they need to bring, they can bring it for free that day. On the 9th, Ashland City will come, and then on the 16th, Pleasant View, East Cheatham, and West Cheatham will come. So that's all. It's just, we just want to ask your help in promoting it. The more people that know about it, the more success we'll have with it. And, you know, anytime we can help you guys, please let us know. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
Is there any additional community input and concerns? No? Okay.
No, I do. I want
Oh,
to
okay.
say, on behalf of the Pattersons here, I understand that there's a need for the city violations codes and ordinances.
Can you state your name?
Tracy Mosfera, which I don't live within the city limits, and I'm grateful. I went to school with Melinda and her sister, and I've been pretty close with them the last year, and they've been through a lot of struggles. And when the city, for the city to assume that the building belongs to Melinda is an inhabitable living quarters, I had read and reread the violation code, and I found this code to be a stretch of the verbiage and the facts as I know them to be true. A dwelling or habitation is the act of living in a building. The stretch in the code pertaining to the matter is to consider the building, she said, place of refuge and storage as Melinda's living quarters or dwellings is absurd. Seeing that this structure has no running water, no refrigeration, no hot plate, no microwave, not even food in there. Did she have a bed set up? Yes, she did. She slept there many times, yet she has. She also stays in the house. And that is where she cooks, cleans, and does all 3 S's. And that's her dwelling. Her father's 78 years old. Her sister is disabled. Melinda is the ultimate caretaker of both father and sister. As any one of us can imagine, a need for a peace retreat is more than understandable. And also, Melinda needs that building for storage for her own belongings since she moved home to take care of her family. But whatever the cause or reasons manipulated to fit the violation code, has violated any and all privacy that Melinda has tried to maintain for herself. It has also caused a distrust and a fear of their neighbors and of city and county officials. Due to the apparent forceful nature when Mr. and Ms. Armstrong were investigating or implicating a violation, Henry Patterson on their first visit, they left no paperwork, no citation at that time, not even a card. And though Henry was unaware, caught off guard by this instance of entrance to the building and a multitude of questions of the city officials and accusations being made were not only confusing to Mr. Patterson, but his words were used against him in this matter, and against Melinda in this matter. Being that the city representative, one would hope that the first priority would be to meet the citizen being inquired about and ask questions. Though the property the building sits on is deeded to Henry Patterson, the building in question is deeded to Melinda Patterson, and Melinda was not home or even reached out to at that time. Mr. Patterson obviously felt he needed to comply and unlock the locked door, where they began to take pictures of Melinda's belongings in bed. And I believe they took a picture of the potty chair she was storing like it was used. It seems the Coast Department in this situation took a report from someone somewhere and used it as fact. Before it was verified. I'm just kind of appalled at the, financial and the stress burden put on this family and the distrust it does bring when you feel like you've been violated, somebody that's forcefully made, you know, he's 78 years old, he's gonna comply. You know, that's what we do, that's what we know until we know better, unfortunately. That's what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else? Okay, move on to department reports. Anything from parks or police?
So you want to talk about the speed limit?
We could briefly discuss that, yeah.
Right now, our speed trailer needs repair.
Okay.
So that's why you've not seen it around town. We will, set in the area more frequently and try to curb some of that. Even with a handheld radar, it's still difficult to set someone able to see you. And speed is very deceiving. A lot of times people feel like that the car's doing 40 or 50, and when we sit up there, it's like 20 to 25. I don't know if y'all want to consider lowering the speed limit. That's y'all's call. We'll do anything we can to try to curb as much as we can. Speed bumps, that's y'all's call. I can tell you that we put them on Park Street, and they were too big, and then we reduced them, and now they're in effect. Nobody is slowing them. So I'm not sure that the
Yeah,
speed bumps is the effective solution.
You never know what, I mean, I live on, I think, one of Kingston Springs only one-way streets, and I see people go down it very fast backwards, probably on a daily basis, but I mean, you know, I don't know. It happens everywhere. It's a tough thing to deal with, and I don't.
Is it one way?
Oh,
when did that happen?
Is that the dead end?
No, it goes down and tees back into it.
Oh,
Hillcrest
okay.
goes around like a horseshoe.
What's the speed limit on Walnut?
It's 20 in the trailer park,
Yeah.
or in the Hillcrest
Yes.
park.
I did.
So,
I mean, I really don't have anything else.
yeah, I don't know, I mean, we could, you know, and we looked into that, like, we really, I mean, so a lot of the enforcement issues maybe could be helped if we had lower speed limits, and that way it would be easier to
Right, because you've got,
take in some of these people.
just for factor of equipment and human factor, you've got to have a little bit of a buffer. If it's 20, you're not breaking at 21.
Yeah.
So the faster the speed, the harder it is to enforce. If you lower the speed limit to 15, then
20 is a reasonable violation.
right, and it lowers that human error equipment factor to where there's no question.
Yeah. I mean, you know, John, you know, we've discussed this in the past, we need to, and I know we need to look into reevaluating the speed limits in town. I mean, there's a lot of places, and I think we need to move on it quickly.
I think Main Street is absolutely a must that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Patterson's up here.
Yeah.
Right here, Main.
Yes,
Stop
I
sign,
agree.
stop
Yeah.
sign.
See, I live
It's still 30, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And even at 30,
You go buzzing by 30, that's fast.
there's people walking out there.
Why don't we just take all the streets that are 30 and under first, like on this first phase? And you said evaluate all streets, right? We don't want to evaluate every street, you know, but take the 30 and under first and tackle those.
I mean,
There's nothing over.
I mean, 30, the only place it's not 30.
Oh,
35
yeah,
is-
those are counties. Yeah, that's right. So that's every street.
every street.
Okay.
I mean, I do a little experiment driving through town, just, I set my cruise control at 30 miles an hour, and see how many people I get to pass me, and I can get somebody to pass me once a week. On a road they're not supposed to pass me on, so I guess.
Well, the difficult thing is the terrain is so different from one curve to the next, one hill to the next. that It's almost impossible to put a speed limit that
in front of the elementary school, people think that's a great place to mask, but then they're not taking effect. There's kids there.
Yeah. And you're not
Same
supposed to
thing
pass
out by the
it.
high school. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the straightest, probably straight away in the city limits is out by the high school, middle school. But, you know, that's not safe at a faster speed with all the traffic and kids.
Can I add something to this about the speed?
Technically, no, but go ahead.
Well, I appreciate it. I don't really think lowering the speed's gonna do a whole lot. The problem really is the ones that don't care or respect the speed limit to begin with. So I'm thinking that if we can put speed bumps to make them slow down, because even Jeremy Vaughn had told me, the radar's not gonna stop them. That's there for the law-abiding citizens to remind them. The only thing that's gonna stop them is when they try to do 40 over that speed bump, they're gonna start slowing down, because they're starting messing the car up. And these are repeaters, these are not.
But I'm looking at it from an enforcement standpoint, that it just makes it more enforceable for us in a highly traffic area to lower the speed.
We can lower it, but I still would suggest speed bumps. And Jeremy, I was out there for an hour and a half this afternoon, right Friday, I guess, so I was running late, taking signatures. I got to 20 houses that answered and signed, and one was not interested. They lived off the road though, so they don't really have any issues. And 3 to 5, there was no answer at that door. That is not very many places in that neighborhood. I've not even got to yet. So I do not mind going 2 more signatures. Everybody is pretty much all for the speed bumps. If y'all don't want to pay for it, I'm pretty sure at this point, if nobody's gonna do anything and their hands are tied, then we the people will take it for ourselves, and as long as y'all approve it, we'll probably pay for it ourselves.
Well,
That is what our taxes are for.
We're gonna move forward with some stuff that, this is my pet peeve too, so speeding, trust me. It's like,
Do streets ever have like the shoulder grids put on the streets themselves, like on the shoulders of the road? Then we put these.
no, we don't have any of those currently.
You do
I don't know
that,
if
you
it's
do
just
that
you
at paving.
actually do that. Huh?
You gotta do that at paving.
At paving?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes up the bicycle,
Cut in,
and
right?
also, usually that would be where the bicycles would be.
And that's for,
If you were on a cycle.
that's really for sleep. When they fall asleep. Like,
I just didn't know if you could put one across the road like a speed bump, and that would be,
Oh,
a wake up call.
a verbal.
Yeah.
Yeah. The ones the speed bumps we have are basically, that's about all the effectiveness they have is
And I don't want to say that.
yeah, they just make, they do.
Depends on the
It's-
vehicle.
I will say, when I watch, because I drive that's like my back and forth to work, so I'm over 3 or 4 times a day, and I will say that when I see people pull in front of me, they see that sign more than anything, that says speed bump, and they will slow down and almost come to a stop. They'll do just like you'd expect people to do on a speed bump. They'll slow down for it just like that, and then they'll speed up and slow down, speed up. Yeah, so it is slowing them down.
Okay.
All right, parks? John, do you have anything additional?
I do got a couple of things, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, to update the commission on some of the things we've talked about before. First is Multimodal and Safe Routes to School grant. Construction bids open for both of these projects next Friday, August 27th, so we'll have an understanding of what those bids look like, once the low bid is established for each. We'll submit that bid package to TDOT for their review. Then we will submit to this board in hopefully September, if we can get feedback from TDOT for your review and approval, and if approved, then it will go back to TDOT for their concurrence on those bids. So we'll keep you posted as this progresses. There was a question that had been posed, what happened to the welcome sign that used to be on Lumen Hills Road at the I-40 interchange? And most of you remember there was a sign at the corner of the Shell property. That sign was removed in anticipation of the multimodal project several years ago. It's been in storage here at City Hall. I pulled it out recently to do some quick fixes and clean it up. My initial plan, and still is right now, is to put it on the Spring Street side of City Hall, because there's no City Hall designation or marker indicating what the building is on the Spring Street side. Just to, there's no sense in it being in storage right now because it's a beautiful sign. To get it out and put it in use, And then once the multimodal project is finished, we can either put it back in its original spot or think of a different sign that might go in that spot. But it is in the process of being tidied up a bit before we'll put it back into service. We'd spoken about the stormwater on Harpeth Meadows and Lloyd Lane. The last information I supplied, both of these locations, we found that mediation of any stormwater issues would be a large undertaking due to the area to be surveyed. Environmental impacts for both areas that contain several blue line streams, and the process would require blessings from TDEC and permits from TDEC, as both of these areas directly impact the Harpeth River. We've had preliminary discussions with an engineer. The city planner and I had hoped to meet earlier this week with an engineer to further those discussions, but we were unable to have those meetings for different circumstances. So that's the next step, is to meet with an engineer to discuss what a full survey and drawn plans for any kind of mitigation efforts in either of those areas would cost the town. So as soon as we get that information together, we'll know what kind of dollars we're looking at to work on those kind of plans. We had talked earlier about a road survey to help with our paving as the years go on, so we can make a paving plan for the next 5 years, 10 years. Spoke with Collier Engineering, got a estimate for them to work out a full paving plan for the town of Kingston Springs, and their road survey work was coming in at about $20,000 bill for us to do. So rather than do that, I've leaned on some of our local and talent and experience and knowledge, as in Tony Campbell and I have started taking tours, windshield tours of the town and the roads, and looking at the road conditions to see what roads are in disrepair now, what roads look to be in disrepair in the next several years or anticipated to be. Tony has a great bit of knowledge when it comes to that type of information. We'll also reach out to other individuals in town and try to do this locally without spending $20,000 to do it. Once we do have that, we will have hopefully we'll have a categorical list of these roads need to be repaired within the next year, these roads need to be repaired next year, the following year, and come up with at least a 5-year plan, preferably a 10-year plan. So I'll continue to lean on Tony, and we'll continue to gather information as we run the roads, as they say, and we'll come up with a list of surveyed roads. Just a couple of more quick things. One is we had spoken about GPS potentially for the police department. We're still working and waiting really for Cheatham County Dispatch, because they have that anticipated to incorporate that in their system, so it would be a county-wide effort. So the county officers, as well as the different municipal officers, would be part of that GPS system. We still feel that rather than having a local effort on our part, it should be more of a county-wide effort. And Cheatham County Dispatch is still looking at their system and looking at cost measures to see what would be the best approach for them. And so we're sort of waiting and following their lead at the moment. We had spoken about sewer mapping really with our I&I, where we were going to look into sewer, checking the pipes. We're going to do some snaking and GIS on where these pipes actually are. Still plan on doing that. It's sort of taken a back seat at the moment in our sewer work, because we are working with engineer to look at dredging, or if not dredging, at least working to get the 2 existing lagoons back online from the sewer department. That's taken front and center stage at the moment. So once we get that, we've made a lot of progress and should have a good plan in place within the next 2 weeks. We'll know how much that's going to cost, which will allow us to then determine how much money we feel we can start our I&I project on, which would be scoping the maps. The last thing is the Lumen Hill Roads Corridor Study. We received the initial draft of the corridor study from Gresham Smith in mid-July. Planner and I reviewed the initial report, returned it with comments requesting additional focus on a few items, including potential lane expansion of East Kingston Springs Road, more details on the potential signalization of the I-40 ramps, and a broader discussion of potential options for the addition of other local corridors to help alleviate congestion on Lumen Hills Road. A second draft of the report was received last week, and although the planner and I have not had a chance to sit down and thoroughly discuss it, just a cursory review, we feel that there are some additional comments that we are going to have and send back to Gresham Smith to be included in the report. It's not quite there yet, as far as we're concerned. And then lastly, there was a quick question on sort of a side note related to that corridor study. As part of TDOT's traffic projection summary, there were several different projects that were included in that corridor traffic study that TDOT had, including the Indian Point subdivision, Kingston Springs Homes, Harpeth Industries, and Fair and Iron Works. While these are all developments that have appeared before the Kingston Springs Regional Planning Commission at some point, right now there's no current activity on any of those developments, but they were included in that project just because they had at one point in time appeared before the Planning Commission, but there's no current activity on any of those. Yes, sir.
Lundy Cup street carving?
Lundy Cup street carving, we have received the final plans from our structural engineer on the base for that carving. Roger Parker and I talked 2 days ago, and he is first of next week going to start building the base for that project. Once that is constructed, probably will take a day or two to construct. It's fairly straightforward. 4 weeks for the concrete to cure, and then we can work with Lundy to set a time for Lundy and his people to help us, and we will establish that.
I know it's at the library, but where, in the front?
Yes, sir. It's, if you're looking at the library, it'll be in the front on the right side, in the open area.
We did well when we hired.
That's it. Thank you, sir.
Okay, before we get into legal and then into the bulk of the agenda, so there are several items on here that require the planner's input, and I believe she was online. Do we know what became of?
We're having some technical difficulties. I'm trying, that's what the Zoom meeting that worked perfectly, of course, this afternoon, but now is not.
Okay.
I can get the planner.
Concerning the monthly department update from the codes department, there's no addresses?
We had discussed that, and it's a work in progress. These reports are all work in progress, and we were happy to supply you with whatever information you might need. But as the, of course, everything we do is public record, but as we produce the meeting packets, we felt that there might be some information that might not be shared with the world by the people that are working through a codes process. So we did not include in this particular edition of this report the actual codes addresses and specific violations, just a list of current active codes, new codes, and resolved codes for this past month. However, if you would like the additional information, we'd be more than happy to supply it. Again, it's sort of a it's a work in progress, but we'll be happy to supply whatever information you
I
want.
feel it's necessary.
Okay.
All right, do we have the planner connected now?
Sharon, can you hear us?
She muted?
In name only.
Okay.
Let's try her on phone.
John?
Yes. Can you hear us? You're on speakerphone.
I can.
Okay.
Okay, and Brittany, we have Brittany there.
Yes, Brittany's
Okay,
here.
okay, so do we have legal? Anything?
No.
All right. Unfinished business, we don't have any, so now we can go ahead and move on to new business. I could go back to school one. New business is item A is consideration of recommendation from the Kingston Springs Regional Planning Commission of an update to the joint Kingdom Growth Plan. I believe we all have maps for that as well. One of you, and Sharon, would you like to speak to this?
Sharon, can you address?
Yes, I can. As the commission is aware, the planning commission and the coordinating committee have been meeting for several months. The county mayor opened the joint growth plan for the county. The recommendation of the coordinating committee and approved by the planning commission for recommendation to the city commission is represented in a map. Now, John, is that map available to them in their packet?
Yes, they have maps on their desks.
The broad strokes of the changes were that the decision was made to remove the ranchettes and 3 large parcels of land from our urban growth boundary. There has been no meaningful interaction overgrowth area over the past 21 years, and having those parcels located, particularly in the ranchettes, within the urban growth boundary of the city causes the applicants for any change to come before our planning commission, then before the county commission, and then if they're subdividing, back to the city commission. Our subdivision regulations and the county zoning ordinance are not concurrent on several items. So the decision was made to remove those from our overgrowth boundary. One of the other driving factors behind that is that development cannot occur on the large tracts because they're not in the county's urban growth boundary. So development there can only occur if the plan is reopened sometime in the future. So with that, the Planning Commission made the recommendation to the City Commission to adopt the change to the urban growth boundary. That will require action from the City Commission in order to forward that to the broader coordinating committee for the entire county.
Very good. So everyone have an idea, this one, there.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
At one time, I think that we were considering contacting the county to see if the ranchettes could be let out of the county zoning and placed in Kingston Springs zonings. I don't know if that ever occurred. I know I had said verbiage on that. You and Sharon were going to contact the county.
I apologize, I was not able to hear that question.
Sharon, let me repeat that too, and please, I'll paraphrase, but please let me know if I don't get the gist of it right. That there was the question that we were going to approach Cheatham County to see if the Ranchettes area could be left in the growth plan, however, fall under the Kingston Springs planning, or Kingston Springs zoning regulations.
We did have that conversation with the county mayor. There is a statute for the state of Tennessee that says once the county has zoning in place, they cannot cede that authority to the city. So the county has had zoning regulations in place for a number of years. So that question was asked. The statute answered the question.
Thank you.
They're not able to cede to our zoning ordinance to make those things congruent.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So the action from the board tonight?
Would be to accept the recommendation of the planning commission, correct? So,
That's correct. The action from the board tonight would be to approve the recommendation and to forward to the broader county-wide coordinating committee the recommendation to adopt the new urban growth boundary for the town of Kingston Springs.
So do we have a motion along those lines? I suppose we have a motion to accept the recommendation of the planning commission.
I make a motion, we accept the recommendation of the planning commission.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? No, all in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Item B is a consideration of preliminary MUPUD Master Development Plan recommendations from the Kingston Springs Regional Planning Commission to the Kingston Springs Board of Commissioners of the PUD MUPD PUD agreement. And Sharon, that's you again.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and Commissioners. As you know, the zoning district for the transitional PUD was adopted a couple of months ago. This is the framework for the PUD agreement between the city and the Golf Club of Tennessee and Mr. Ingram. There are 4 elements that are in your packet. Those have been vetted by the Planning Commission and approved. They include the layout of the proposed development. They include the density model for residential versus commercial versus infrastructure. It also includes the road plan. It also includes all of the elements of the buildings that they are locating. So tonight, what we need from the City Commission is approval of those 4 elements, and then the City Attorney, John, and I will work out the agreement and bring it back to the City Commission for formal approval and signature by the Planning Commission and the City Commission.
Everybody get that?
Yes.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
On the maps, it's hard to see since it's so small, and I couldn't get it big on my computer screen without it making it not focused. How many,
Mayor, could
what-
you repeat that?
Yeah, I'll repeat, once she's finished, I'll try to translate.
I said it was hard to see it on the screen without it being on focus. On the first map that we have here, the C10, C1, or 1.0, what is the residential component of that? I think, I just can't read what the percentages are.
Do you have in front of you, Sharon, the residential percentages, the development, that was C?
C1 is 0.
John, I do not have that in front of me. I apologize. We've had some of these technical difficulties over the night. But the percentages were approved by the Planning Commission, and they fall within the guidelines of the PUD, and the Transitional Use District. So
I think
that in that document, we do have a larger representation in John's office of that. And to answer that question, it was presented in a public hearing and at the Planning Commission meeting before it came to the City Commission.
We've got a source here for us right now.
Thank you.
Commissioner, my name is Jeff Hoover with Mark Coffin Associates. Answer to that question is the required range was 10 to 50% for residential, and we are at the 10%.
Thank you.
Jeff just indicated, in case you didn't hear, Jeff just indicated that they were at the 10%.
That is correct. That was the negotiated agreement. For the percentages, there's a great deal of slope on that property. The golf course takes up the bulk of it, which is a recreational and agricultural use of the property.
Very good. Is there any additional questions, discussion? I mean, if we can get to that. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion, we approve as recommended by the Planning Commission.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any other questions, discussion? None? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None, motion passes. All right, item C is a motion to approve resolution 21-009, implementing a policy regarding emergency paid sick leave for COVID-19 related testing, illness, and quarantine.
Previously, City Hall was following state executive orders, and more specifically, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act concerning employer-provided leave related to COVID-19. The Families First Act provided 80 hours of paid sick leave when an employee was unable to work due to COVID-19 related quarantine, illnesses, or I'm sorry, lost my train of thought. 80 hours when employees were unable to work due to COVID-19 related quarantine or illnesses, but that has recently expired. Our goal is to help facilitate the health and safety of the town employees, and this resolution would grant staff the same 80-hour COVID-related time-related symptoms, illnesses, and quarantine. So that's what we're asking for.
Can't remember on the state, is it reset? Is it 80 hours a year? How is it all?
Yeah, I mean, what's the
You can't get it 80 hours 10 times in a row.
It's not just 80 for everything, it's 80 for the COVID in addition to what's there already. How much is there already?
How much is
Expired.
Expired.
Yeah.
Well, I know the COVID piece did, the 80 hours did from the family
Yes.
leave act. What I'm asking is, what's the base now? I mean, what is it, since that expired, what is it going back to?
There is none.
There is no?
No, there is no elected time off that an employer is granted from, in this particular case, it's federal mandate, so that now the employee just has their own personal time or vacation or
So
sick
this
time.
would be 80 additional hours just for that purpose of
Correct.
of COVID isolation or COVID?
Yes, and that would be, and it would need to be specific and documented to that.
Right. Gives them the 2 weeks basically.
Right. But it doesn't impact what they already have of regular sick leave?
No, sir.
Okay, it just adds additional 80 hours.
It adds that additional 80 hours to be used specifically for
That's what I'm trying to
that. Yes.
understand. Okay. All right.
I guess the language of it, there was a lot of discussion on that. You know, if you have contact tracing this week, and then 2 weeks from now, and then 4 weeks from now, it's 80 hours over what time span?
Well, it's 80 hours, period, through whatever date y'all sunset.
Okay, that's what I
So
said.
if you look on number 6, there's a blank there for
Oh,
you to
that.
fill in tonight.
Okay.
Whatever date you wanted to sunset it with.
So what's the idea, 80 a year or 80?
Well, I think it's 80 till the day.
So whatever, that's what I'm
Whatever
asking.
day
So-
is that.
December 31st again, or?
And we could update this in the future
We could
if
extend it.
necessary.
Right, so what we're talking about is maybe setting a date of 12/31 of this year and then reviewing it in January?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Is this 80 hours coming out of like a general fund or an employee fund, or is there any way this could be carved out of the American Rescue Plan funding?
It's not, technically, it's not any additional funding that needs to be added to payroll. It's just the fact that the employee would continue to get paid just as they would be at work. However, they would not be at work.
Unless they really work at sick.
But if they can't, we'd still have to hire out someone to do their work.
That would not be the plan.
I've seen John out.
I saw that.
We would try, we work well together as a team. I think
Mike
everyone
thinks so,
does.
Trash.
And to clarify, that's a good point. You haven't had to hire out.
We are not.
So,
And as part of this, that anybody that can work from home, and it's one of the things that we've really stressed and tried to beef up and improve, that as people can work from home, then we would hope they would still be able to. But we've not hired out, and we would not plan on hiring out or using any additional funds to cover any outages unless absolutely necessary.
I think 12/31 is very reasonable.
That gives us a good point to reevaluate. It seems like a sensible date.
So, John, make sure before, if we needed to pay overtime in the situation of police, I want to make sure that that's allowed. Like, we're saying, not hire out people. If we have a police officer off with COVID, then we would probably need to pay some overtime to current officers to fill those gaps, and that's.
We can't send
I just
John
wanna
out
make
in
sure.
the spot.
And we do have overtime in the
In the
police budget.
budget, yes, we have
We do.
overtime in the budget.
So, yeah, I don't think this would change
Yeah,
that
that
at
would
all.
stay.
It'd be at your discretion.
12/31.
I have another question. Is there going to be any kind of, I know we can't make people get vaccinated, is there going to be any kind of mitigation plan for someone to encourage that?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the first
Looking
part of the question.
at requirements, I mean,
Vaccination.
vaccination requirements. So far as I know, the state is very anti
Right.
anyone doing that.
Right. I'm just looking at this and saying, you know, there's got to be some mitigation on the part of the employee, not the sick.
Yeah, I mean, I
That would be the
I
rules of
understand
law.
that completely, but I don't think that we have any, I don't think there's any way legally for us to do that, is there?
At this time, I don't think with all of the statutes that have been passed and executive orders that you require vaccines. I do have a rule that doesn't have
That's what I'm saying. We can pass whatever we want. But I think what you're saying is maybe some just general language on keeping safe and doing your best effort to avoid, correct?
Well, that, and just if, I don't know if we can even go so far as to say if you aren't, you would not be eligible for this. Would that be a bridge too far?
I just feel like, yeah, I mean,
Acceptable.
I can totally understand, like, you know, obviously a lot of lost productivity happens because people get sick. But I think the way the state legislature has viewed this and the way the governor has viewed this at this point, that's almost an impossibility. I mean, that's just, you know, in some states that's happening, but in Tennessee, I just don't think legally we could. You know.
If you look at our employees too, I don't think it was really going to take advantage of this. That might be an issue.
I recommend 12/31. Is it a recommendation or a motion?
Do you would recommend passing the resolution with the sunset of 12/31/21 and item number 6?
And I'm second.
Actual motion.
Yeah.
So a motion to approve the resolution 21-009 sunsetting 12/31/21 with an evaluation prior to that date.
I second.
Do we have a second? Any other further discussion? John, call the roll.
Carolyn Clark,
No.
Josh Etherly, Tony Gross,
Yes.
Mike Hargis,
Yes.
Lynn Remick.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Item D is a motion to approve on first reading ordinance 21-009, amending ordinance 20-003 of the 2020-2021 budget.
Our Finance Director, Kelly Reed, will speak to this.
You're on deck, Kelly, for the first time, right?
This is just an ordinance. This will be first reading. First reading will be next month. This will be to make the corrections and adjustments from last year's budget. This is something that Ms. Debbie Finch has always done with you all, and I think you all will be kind of familiar with it from the past.
All right, well, do we have a motion?
Motion.
Do we have a second? Second. Is there any discussion there? Since it all happened before you. All right, John, could you call the roll?
Carolyn Clark, Lynn Remick,
Yes.
Tony Gross,
Yes.
Josh Etherly,
Yes.
Mike Hargis.
Yeah.
Really quick, just to go back to see, I know we passed the discussion, but you do a good job with this already, John, kind of keeping us up to date. But I think it would be a good idea for us through this to just be aware, the commission be aware if anybody's unpaid.
Yes, of course. Will do.
All right, item E is a motion to approve on first reading ordinance 21-010, amending ordinance 21-006 of 2021-2022 budget.
This is a first reading as well. This is for the current budget year. And if you recall, last month, we discussed the local government, state local government grants for the $40,000.
Yeah.
That we were buying the handguns for the police department, the software. There was a list of things that we had in that packet. So this is to allocate that money in the budget. And also there was a correction to the budget for a miscalculation in health insurance in the sheriff's department. And I can show you the specifics on that if you wanted to see it, but it's just probably a fat finger entering the numbers.
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second? Any discussion? John, call the roll?
Carolyn Clark,
Yes.
Lynn Remick,
Yes.
Tony Gross,
Yes.
Mike Hargis,
Yes.
Josh Etherly.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item F is a motion to approve on first reading ordinance 21-011, amending Article 8 of the Town of Kingston Springs zoning ordinance, notice requirements to the Planning Commission and the Board of Zoning Appeals.
This ordinance was drafted from feedback received from Commissioner Clark on updating our policies and requirements pertaining to public notification of certain zoning actions. The ordinance was first presented to the Kingston Springs Planning Commission for their review in their August 12th meeting, and it was approved for recommendation there to the Board of Commissioners.
And if I could jump in as well,
Yes.
I have spoken with Commissioner Clark. Commissioner Clark, do you want me to make the changes that you were gonna suggest at this time, or do you wanna do it yourself?
No, that's fine, go ahead.
Okay. Commissioner Clark had suggested that on this ordinance, you will look at, she pointed out, this was just something that all of us failed to catch. Item D in this first section, it's on page 2, it talks about being posted 1,000, along each 1,000 feet of public street. And then we also have notices for zoning ordinance amendments over on page 3, under section A, number 4, and that's 300 feet. And so, she would recommend that we pick one or the other, but have it consistent across the board. And then also with respect to the signage, she would like to add an item, G and H, G being, that the notice, include an address if there is one available. Sometimes we have unaddressed parcels, but, that they'd include an address if any. And then the other one, is that it include the, nature of the action that's, coming before the board. And so those would be, the amendments that you would propose to make to this ordinance. Those are germane to what has already been approved by the Planning Commission, so I think that if you all chose to amend it, for those particular items, that would be fine, and it would not have to be sent back to the planning commission.
So
Ms.
it's
Ms.
just-
Martha?
so there's just an inconsistency in the feet requirement?
Yeah, basically how many signs you want to put on the road frontage.
Okay.
The proposed action for the zoning change and the address is applicable would be for the newspaper and also for the sign.
For both actions, thank you for clarifying that, yes. And then also I found one typo when I was talking with her on item A1 on page 3, there are 2 parentheses after the 3 feet by 2 feet, so we'll make that correction.
Okay, so this one is 300 feet, what was the other one, 100,000?
1,000.
Okay, so by changing the, we're talking about changing both to 1,000 or both to 300?
That's at the pleasure of this board.
Just the same.
Yeah, well, I think initially when I first proposed it, it was 300, that's what all their surrounding counties and cities have is 300 feet.
What does the language say, and you want on the physical sign, the proposed action?
Yeah, zone C, or R1 to C2, C2 to
So
R1.
it's simple?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
What is the pleasure of the board?
So let's say we had a really long road frontage deal, how many signs would we get now? So 300 yards, 300 feet is 100 yards?
Yes, sir.
Football
Every
field.
yard, every football field.
So it's not more than a football field, you only have one sign?
Yes, sir.
Okay. 1,000 feet is, of course, several football fields, so.
3 signs.
It would give you.
3 signs.
Yeah, 3 plus 100, so. All right.
Probably would be good with just 3, I don't know.
Okay, that makes sense, 300 feet. Who's responsible for getting the signs? I guess we are the zoning commission.
Our plan right now would be to get signs that we would have basically blanks on that we could then fill in, and then that cost, as well as the certified mail cost, then would be a pass-through to the applicant.
Okay, and so printing it in newspaper, what newspaper do we print it in?
It would be the Cheatham Exchange, which is our current newspaper of
We
local
did,
distribution.
Planning Commissioner Cullen recommended that we also have some language in there that included our website and whatever media we're using. We didn't want to specify the media because we don't know. We want it to last in the future, so.
I think the language said however we transmit the agenda.
Yeah,
That's
so.
Okay.
So we need this motion.
All right.
Motion approved with the amendments regarding the signage and the newspaper information and changing the postings every 300 feet.
So that, I just want to make sure, since this is actually first reading on an ordinance, so with respect to the newspaper, that's going to be section, item A, dealing with section 8.070C, number 1. So it would be a notice of public hearing, this is talking about being published in the newspaper, a notice of public hearing, including the applicable parcel number, address, if any, and proposed action shall be published in a newspaper, and that would continue. Then that would take us over to the next page where we are adding an item G, that basically saying the sign shall include an address, if any, for the property. Adding an item H that says the sign shall include the proposed action. And then that is also going to, on item D on that page, we're going to change that to 300 feet, right, that's the one we've decided on. And then on page 3, in item A1 on that page, we're gonna remove that parentheses, and then we're gonna add also the same items with respect to it specifying already says on item number 2, specify date, time, and location of scheduled public hearing, and we would include in that an address, if any, and proposed action. Does that capture everything, Commissioner Clark? Okay.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? John, could you please call the roll?
Carolyn Clark?
Yes.
Glenn Rubin?
Yes.
Tony Gross?
Yes.
Mike Hargis?
Yes.
Uh,
That's me.
Josh
That guy
Adams.
down there.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Motion passes.
I do have a comment on this, and this may be completely silly, but I know you're talking about all those things written on there. I think it may be something in the future, you know, you go to restaurants now, they get a menu, a QR code. I think there is availability as we move into the future of these things. You can put a QR code on something like that, and it takes you directly to the website. You don't have to put that stuff in one place, and all the information's there, and it keeps a lot of phone calls from happening.
But that would require people to stop at the sign though.
You can't read the sign from your car anyway.
Yeah, and it's not gonna get out and look at it.
You would hope to.
Superman.
You would hope to be able to read it.
You should be able to.
I mean, some of those
Well,
signs. I'm just saying for the future, for some of these documentations.
Oh, it's a great
When I
idea.
was thinking about this, I was like,
Yes.
Yeah,
we put it in one spot.
Oh, yes.
that's a great idea. Like,
Mr. Campbell would never be able to look at it, he doesn't use the phone.
I've heard his,
He's
we've heard his phone.
Print
We
it
all
out.
know he has a phone.
okay, all right, item D is a motion to approve the exchange of firearms confiscated by the Kingston Springs Police Department via a licensed qualified law enforcement firearms dealer as provided in PCA 39-17-1317, and to authorize Chief Ivy to petition the court for authority to exchange. You guys got a lot of guns sitting around, looks like.
They do. How long did it take to get that?
Since 1993.
Really?
We've never,
Wow.
we've never gotten rid of it. So everything from 1993 has been in the evidence room, and everything's been signed home.
I'd love to see that. But what do you plan to do with it?
Well, typically, I mean, you can do several things. You can do public auction, you can do several things. But one of the things that is more popular is gun dealers that give law enforcement prices on Glock or whatever brand weapons. They'll come out and price the weapons, and they'll give you a trade. We have had them looked at by an inspector that simply gives each weapon a grade. He doesn't give prices. He just simply came out, inspected each weapon, gave it a grade, and so we'll know a little bit more about what the value should be once we know how they're graded.
And our own police department wouldn't want to go shopping in our, we spend money on small arms. This would be something that we would utilize.
What we would probably do with it, I mean, just a thought, is
Yeah.
we may, because a lot of the service weapons are getting pretty old.
Yeah.
So we may look at trading our service weapons with those
Okay.
and getting new service weapons.
Help offset the cost of the product.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I like that idea better than the public auction.
Public auctions get into some,
Yeah.
you know, it's, number one, if they was ever put in NCIC stolen, you've got to make sure everything's been taken out. And then you have
Put
to
the
have.
dealer worried about that.
And you have to have a dealer that will do the transfer, and you have to do the background. I mean, it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah,
It's
I
not
saw
impossible.
one of them had the serial number filed off. It's gonna be kinda hard to do.
Yeah,
that.
Those are
can't
Daisy
do
BB
that
guns.
one, you can't.
Daisy BB guns. No problem.
That one will have to be taken.
Yeah.
What will we do with the funding from these?
well, that's the thing we're talking about.
What would we do?
Weapons.
Put them towards weapons?
Replacement of their sidearms.
I mean, it could be sidearms, it could be shotguns, basically just replacing, offsetting the cost.
New for old.
How much money do you think we could generate?
I have no idea. I really would like to get that, I mean, I don't even, you know, I buy new guns, but I don't buy used guns, and I don't know the values, so.
You know, the idea of actually ridding the guns that we've acquired and getting more guns with that. Or, I mean, I would love to see them go towards the flower gardens at Burns Park or something. To the extreme of which taking some weapons and turning them into something more non-violent. That's just my idea. That's intriguing. 1993.
Well, that was when the department was created, so I don't know what year the first weapon was confiscated.
56, I
So, you know, and you have to look at that list and know that the large majority of these are not.
They're not service weapons.
Yeah, they're not.
Not close.
Some of them are.
Even the shotguns probably aren't rigged for police use, so it makes a lot of sense to get them off our hands, get them to a licensed dealer, take the value of that, trade it in so that we can require what weapons we need to use on the police department, so that makes perfect sense.
Does the motion have to be what we're doing with the funds?
So, with respect to this, if it is going to be a trade-in, Tennessee code, as you can imagine, this is specific about what you can and can't do. If it's gonna be used for trade-in, we have to actually have the court's already turned them over to us. But if we determine that we're gonna trade them in, then the court has to now authorize us to trade them in with only certain dealers can we do this with. So, depending on what your action is what you're going to be requesting.
And this is, the action requested here is to allow GBIB to petition the court, correct? So that's actually,
Correct.
that
To do
is.
a trade.
Yeah, right.
I make a motion, we approve the ordinance to trade it, to see if we can exchange the firearm.
Petition the court.
Petition the court.
To
Permission.
trade these firearms for more firearms, correct?
That's right. That's exactly right.
And do we have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Roll call.
Let's do a roll call, sorry, no.
Carolyn Clark,
Yes.
Glenn Remick,
No.
Tony Gross,
Yes.
Mike Hargis,
Yes.
Josh Evans.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Do we have, are we still connected up?
Sharon, are you still there?
Okay. All right, so now we are on discussion of policies and procedures related to Kingston Springs codes enforcement.
So this item was added to the agenda at the request of Commissioner Clark to discuss the policy and procedures related to Kingston Springs code enforcement. I'll let Commissioner Clark expand on the item. We also have our codes official and our planner on the phone.
Okay, you all met the Pattersons earlier. I had the pleasure of meeting them when Linda
Would you like
Patterson.
Move the phone
Would you like
over
to
so
move
they
the
can
phone a
hear.
little more central? I think that might be better.
Or at least let them hear.
Here.
So you all met the Pattersons earlier. I had the pleasure of meeting the Pattersons when Melinda Patterson called me to seek assistance on a code violation visit that they had had. So I've gotten to know them over the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And my first introduction to you, I know their cousin. I know Mr. Tidwell, who is also their uncle. And gotten to know them very well. Feel like they're family already. But I was just very upset with how they were treated, because what Melinda imparted to me, I have no reason to doubt them as to what occurred, and I was upset after visiting with them, not because I felt sorry for them, not because I have sympathy for them, I do have empathy, but because I was part of this commission that allowed this to occur to them. They felt like they were, I'm relaying this not as fact, but as how they told me that they were treated. They felt like they were bullied. They felt like they had no choice in any matters. They felt like, some of the things they said to me, they had no way of knowing when Amanda was in there trying to clean up the coffee pot from the broken glass. And they came, Mr. and Miss Armstrong came to the kitchen, and they said, "Can you come back? This is not a good time." And Amanda said that Mrs. Armstrong said, "No, we have 5 more places to go to, we have to do this now." I don't doubt the veracity of that, because looking back at last month's code reports, they went to 5 places, I think. So I have no reason to think that the Petersons are lying or embellishing. They follow the law. They're simple people, but they're not simpletons. And I just think the way the codes department has done this, they presented no credentials. As far as I know, through the UCC, the ICC, excuse me, they're supposed to have credentials, and I've gotten a call from another person who said that they had requested some identification, so they're coming to the door with no identification. And I just got upset, because this, like Belinda said, this is Kingston Springs. We're a small town. We are not Bellmead. We are not Franklin. We are not Brentwood. I don't think we want to be. And I think in the letter, I hope you all read it, because I don't want to go through it again, but I was not requesting deference for these people because they're longtime residents. They are. I learned a lot about maybe the first house on Kingston Springs. Their uncle was married to Wanda Patterson, or Bayless Patterson. Billy Joe, who lives on the corner of Patterson and Mount Pleasant, Her last name was Wells. She was married to a former commissioner. Her maiden name is Patterson. Henry's son lives 2 doors down. And it's just, it's one of his house was built in 1800. It was one of the first black communities in Kingston Springs, from what I understand, which I didn't know. There was a black school there. And of course, we have the black cemetery there. So they have been here for a long time. And I think, like Melinda said, it wasn't so much a question of the law. I know we have our ordinances. I know we follow the law. There was no discretion to be had, and it felt like there was no compassion with a reasonable time frame for anything, for them to do anything, because Melinda does live, she does caretake for her father and her sister, who is disabled, who had spine surgery, who just learned to walk again, who's now learning to use dexterity of her hands again. And they are not trying to, Melinda is a vital person too. She works all the time. So she's doing all this and taking care. And like her friend Tracy said, she's just looking for a respite, to have some place to lay her head, to get away from the small house with 3 people in it. And like I said, she lived inside, she cooks inside, she does bathes inside. And I think that there's just a question sometimes of selective enforcement. It seems like we are coding, sometimes are going after codes enforcement for a lot of the disadvantaged people. Weeds, 12-foot high weeds, when we have 12-foot high weeds and trees growing out of a certain elephant up the road. And I don't see anything being done with that for the past 20 years in our codes enforcement. And I remember complaining on that one back from 2013 and 2015 and 2018. And that's allowed to sit there, and I think these small violations are being investigated and enforced, when there's a lot of other ones in town that are not being enforced. So it does seem a little selective. And I also found out that we do also take anonymous complaints. I know Wilson County does not take anonymous complaints, and I think if someone is going to stand up and make a codes complaint, they need to follow up. I remember years ago, in 2013, I think, when Mr. Sullivan, Andy Sullivan, was put in a spot of having a code violation. And I think the people that had complained on him were anonymous, and I think there was one person, and I remember the paper saying, the advocate saying, there's tons of people complaining about Mr. Sullivan. And I did Open Records Act, which is this, I still have it, Mr. Sullivan's file here, and there was one person who would complain, and that was it. And I think that ended up costing Mr. Sullivan a lot of money. And I think, I'm sorry? So I think that our codes officials need to, they don't know the town, they don't know the people, and I think you have to know there's a certain aura about Kingston Springs, since we are a small town. It's a big live and let live type town. And I think to have heavy-handed codes enforcement, people with no credentials coming to the doors, and it's just, and behaving in an intimidating manner, presenting themselves as, newly appointed codes officials, and I thought there was just going to be one codes official. It turns out sometimes there's 2 codes officials. And I didn't know the city planner was also going to be a codes official. And I wonder if we're paying for that, as well as Mr. Armstrong, and paying for Mrs. Armstrong as well, to be in both capacities. And I would like to see our codes enforcement. I think I was looking at Franklin, and they call their codes enforcement department Building and Neighborhood Services. What a great name. Instead of codes enforcement, if we approach it in a more friendly manner, with a more friendly name, I think we would get more people to comply with more of a suggestion than a hammer and a nail. And I think we could also follow up with a solution and have a neighborhood action team, a neighborhood task force who could come behind some of these weeds are too high. Hey, we've got a team of people here that can help find a solution. I think we should be more solution-based than we do hammer and nail. And really just intimidating, make people's lives just kind of miserable.
I was not aware of the Patterson situation, but I was aware of another resident in Kingston Springs who said the exact same thing. That Mr. Armstrong came, he was very aggressive, he was very rude, intimidating, and he had no credentials whatsoever. And it just was, again, hammer and nail, just coming in really hard. I think that's just not how we should treat our citizens.
I looked up the ICC code, and I thought that a codes person has to be credentialed by the fire marshal. And I know the fire marshal does give picture credentials out, and it says that in the ICC codes, it says that a codes official shall present their credentials. And shall is kind of a definitive legal word that they must do that. And so I don't know if our codes officials are not certified through the fire marshal, through the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance or not. So that'd be a question.
Mike, would you like to speak to that? Can you hear everything?
Mine here. Yes, I'm here.
Were you able to hear the discussion?
Well, no, we can't be able to hear much of nothing. I'm trying to follow it on Facebook. I don't know who these people are. I know who, we could not hear what Mrs.
Clark?
Patterson said
Ms. Patterson.
earlier tonight, so I won't try to address any of that. The kind of gist that we could get in and out as we could get in and off the computer was that she felt like I was overbearing. But I want to point out to everybody that she wasn't there. She doesn't know what was discussed during that day. She doesn't know what was said during that day. So, this is second-hand knowledge, and I think during the meeting that we did have with the Pattersons, with Commissioner Clark and the brother, that he admitted as much, that no, he said he needed to find his key. He didn't know if he could find the key. And his other daughter, if I recall correctly, said, well, I know where it's at. She just went and got the key in there. And he took us out to the back to see the shed. I don't know if any of y'all have ever had the experience of doing codes enforcement. I'm sure that the police chief probably has in some manner. But this isn't a happy circumstance to have to walk onto somebody's property and then address these violations of our city laws with them. They generally don't take it well. You know, I've never had anybody celebrate the fact that I showed up to point things out to them or discuss matters with them. In fact, it's generally quite the opposite. But at any rate, Mrs. Patterson was not there. The first time I spoke with her father, Mrs. Patterson was not there. The second time that I talked with her father, and I don't believe I'm aggressive. There's no fun, easy, pretty, dress it up kind of way to tell somebody, mow your yard. You know, you've got trash out in your yard. You've got a circumstance here that's unacceptable, and you're going to have to address it. In this particular case, we were talking about somebody who lives in a storage building, a building that's not constructed for someone to live in. It has a electric wire ran through the air to the back porch that was handmade and is plugged into a light socket on an open back porch. And I'm no electrician, but I don't think that will meet up with codes. It has air conditions. It has
And all of those things were running off that single cord hooked up to presumably, I guess, a 15 amp breaker somewhere?
I don't know, and as far as I know, there's no breaker, I don't know what breaker the light switch goes to, but whatever's coming off of that light, all of that that's working in that room, in that storage building out there, is run off of that one wire.
Hey,
I think we're getting
Yeah,
into the
Mr.
weeds. and-
Yeah, Mr. Armstrong, I got a question. Can you hear me pretty quick? Can you hear me?
Yes.
There was a certified letter sent to the Pattersons, correct?
There was.
And
Yes.
it's my understanding that you visited them after the certified letter, correct?
Oh, no.
You did not visit them after the certified letter was mailed.
No, because Miss Belinda Patterson, I was going to deliver some paperwork to her father. And here's how aggressive and how uncaring and all of that we are. Mr. Patterson, when we left the yards, now, let me get back to the tag team and the two-card, okay?
Well, really quick, I just want to be very clear on the question. There was a certified letter sent, and you did not visit them after that certified letter was sent? Ever?
No, I went on a Tuesday. They had not received the letter.
No, I'm not talking about if they've received it. Did you visit them after you sent it?
Yes. I went to the residence one time.
Okay, the purpose of a certified letter is to send documents and receive that the person has received the documents. Therefore, you don't have to visit the person to see if they received the documents, correct?
Well, see, here's the other part you don't know, though, is I told Mr. Patterson that we were going to try to, would he be willing to accept some assistance if we could find him some assistance that might help him with his primary structure,
So what was the purpose of the certified letter?
to notify them formally of the violations that we had already discussed and put it in writing.
Okay.
In fact, the certified letter was sent pretty much at Miss Patterson's insistence.
Right.
She didn't want to talk to her daddy.
Correct, and that's kind of my question. If we send a letter and we notify them, why do we have a reason to go back?
Well, if you'll let me finish, I'll tell you. When we had our first meeting with Mr. Patterson, we asked him that, would he be willing to accept some assistance if we could find some assistance for him for his primary residence? He indicated he would be willing to entertain that. And so, uncaring old people like we are, we just were able to find some assistance for them, or a means that a possible assistance anyway. And we got the paperwork from the gentleman that he has to apply to and all of that, and I was going to take it over to them. I asked him during the meeting that we had with Commissioner Clark and Belinda Patterson and Mr. Patterson, we asked him again, and he said yes, he wanted to take the paperwork. In fact, he took the folder I had for him and gave it over to Commissioner Clark. And so I was supposed to deliver that paperwork to him, the application to him on a Tuesday. I told him in advance that I would be doing that on that Tuesday. Melinda called me and asked, was I coming over there or something once? And I think I told her, yes, I've got to bring your dad some paperwork. I promised him I would. And that's when they wanted to do the meeting, and we did the meeting. And then I drove by to check it on Tuesday, just a drive-by check. Melinda was outside, I pulled inside, she walked out, I talked to her and asked her, had she gotten her letter? She said no, and I said, well, you will, very shortly. I'm sure it's in the mail, it's already in the mail, so you'll be getting it.
Mr. Armstrong?
I left the yard, and that was it.
Mr. Armstrong, do you have credentials which you show?
I do now. I did not then.
Is that from the fire marshal?
No. I don't know where it came from. John gave it to me.
I thought all codes inspectors have to go through the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance and then get a certification from the fire marshal.
Not to my knowledge.
When you're doing codes inspection, like for construction of a building, yes, you have to go through that. You have to, like a year after you've been hired to complete that. When it's just property maintenance type enforcement, no, there's not a certification.
This is the enforcement of the property maintenance code, not the building codes. Different codes.
Now, and the reason, I want to go back to one thing I heard a little bit about Commissioner Park saying, the reason there were two of us on that initial visit that first day is because this case, as the complaint was made, involved zoning violations with the placement of a structure without a permit and code violations. So we both went to check on this.
And what's the process that generally happens for a code violation? They're reported to you. In this case, I believe you received it through the county because someone had complained to the county, and then that was turned over to you, correct?
That's correct. We got that. I guess the call was made into a hotline for the county, and the county codes official knew that the city planner did the codes or for zoning, you know, and that would have been a zoning question, someone living in a storage building, so he referred it over to her.
Did it not go through the city manager?
I'm not sure if it did or not. I wasn't on board at that time.
I'm sorry, would you repeat that question?
Glenn asked if it would go through would it not go through the city manager, but, I mean, ultimately it goes to the codes official, I assume.
It does. Dale Saunders contacted me, Mayor Gross, with the initial complaint that was filed by a citizen. We did not have any idea who filed the complaint. At that point, it was just an anonymous complaint. So somebody asked about the process. I believe the process is first the code official makes an inspection to determine if there's a violation.
Does the code official
send a certified letter if there isn't a violation? So in this particular case, the complaint was the occupation of a storage building for sleeping purposes, which is a violation of the International Property Code. So we did not perceive Mr. Patterson or his other daughter to be under distress. We got there about the time we heard the coffee pot hit the floor. He had already opened the door. We offered to assist him in picking up the glass. He said it was fine. We helped him clean that up. We talked to him about it. He explained to us that the storage shed belonged to his daughter, not to him, and that there was a key somewhere. If he could find it, the other daughter found it. We asked for Melinda's contact information, and then the letter was sent because there was a violation. And the violation is not only a property maintenance code violation, it's a fire code violation. You can't occupy that structure as a sleeping quarters because you're vulnerable at night when you're asleep and it's not built for that occupation. So after the visit was done, we explained to him that there would be a letter coming. And then in the letter, Mr. Armstrong asked for Melinda to call him because Mr. Patterson disclosed that it was her storage building and that she was sleeping in there at night. So Melinda did not return that call, and then the next thing that we received was the letter that Commissioner Clark forwarded to the commission and to the city manager. And that letter was done without any conversation either with the codes official or myself. So the process then becomes the process for violations and curing a violation is established in the property maintenance code. 10 days from the time of the receipt of the letter, unless they've made contact and there is some way to allow additional time, it's a 10-day cure. In this particular case, it was the removal of a bed and removal of the illegal electrical connection to the building, which has since been accomplished by Melinda.
And to be verified,
We still have to do a follow-up inspection in order to close the case to verify that the building is no longer being used as sleeping quarters. During the course of the conversation, we asked Mr. Patterson if he could use some assistance with the primary residence because we noticed that there were some areas of disrepair on the structure itself. We then contacted people that we knew, retrieved an application, and that was the purpose of the visit for Mr. Armstrong to go back on a Tuesday. So it's not that there's a code team, we only have to work together, and we do so in order to save money for the city. Make one visit to address both issues, both the zoning and the code violation at the same time so that we're not billing separately. And one of the other things I'd like to address is there's a statement in Mr. Clark's letter that she's paid for 2 codes officials. That's inaccurate. As the zoning administrator, I get paid a flat salary. If there's a zoning violation, that is a part of that flat fee per month that I charge for zoning services, so there's no separate billing for that. And with that, I'm gonna answer any other questions, and we'll hand this back to the codes official.
What strikes me, just, and I think we walked through the Patterson case pretty well. I heard another commissioner bring up another case. I'm not familiar what he was talking about because he didn't say. I have a good guess which one it probably is. But if he would like to discuss that, I'd like to address it.
Glenn, was that something you wanted?
I think it's just gonna go.
Well, you know, if I may, Sharon, I think, did a great job of laying out what the process is. And I don't think what is in our docket is the process. I think that's clear, right? It's
right.
Commissioner Clark, it's not the process that you brought up, it's the way the
Yes,
process.
yes, it's never been a matter of the law, it's been a matter of how the law is being enforced.
Agreed.
I mean, I don't know, because I read this letter and it sounds like you want special treatment for people that live here a long time.
No,
This is the line says, further the residents who made Kingston Springs their home long before anyone on the commission moved here, and whose town lineage dates back to great-grandparents should command more respect and perhaps be afforded more latitude in circumstances when circumstances demand it. So that means, the way I read that is, because of town lineage, more latitude should be granted to them. Their living history, I mean, these are all, I mean, we don't want to, I don't know, I think that we should apply to everybody. I don't think we should treat people special.
That could be my inartful way of saying I was trying to introduce the commission to a family that has been here with their great-grandparents. And yes, more latitude when the circumstances demanded, I think is what I put. And these circumstances did demand discretion. They demanded a pin, to put a pin in it. I requested of Mr. Armstrong, can you put a pin in this, just to give them more time? Nope, can't put a pin in it. Can you let,
Mayor Brooks?
Yes.
In the code, there is an opportunity for the codes official to allow more time or handle a case differently. In this circumstance, this violation is a life safety issue. That would be like the fire chief saying, well, I know you don't have any of the stuff you're supposed to have, but it's okay, go in and open your restaurant anyway. You put people in here, and if it catches on fire, it's no big deal. But it just, I can't do it when it's a life safety issue.
I think we're getting,
I think the Pattersons, in the presence of Commissioner Clark,
We have multiple residents who are saying you were aggressive, rude, intimidating, and did not show any credentials. This is where I have issues with, is the tack in which you're going about it. We've had other codes officials before, but we've never had so many people complain about how it was presented.
That's not true. I mean, if you don't get it on one end, you get it on the other end. Up until now, the calls I often get are the calls from people complaining about the fact that we don't enforce our codes.
That's true.
And we have actually closed a lot of those cases, finally, Like, and that's been an ongoing process. I have run into that time after time after time, because we've had codes enforcement processes in place where nothing was done, because nobody likes to do that job. It's a job nobody likes to do. I don't think Mike particularly enjoys it.
And as a city commissioner, I'm representing the people tonight, and I have people who are saying to me, this is what they've
I
done.
think it'd be very important.
So I'm not representing the city, I'm
To your
representing the
point,
people.
Tony, John, how many cases have the codes official, Mr. Armstrong, worked?
Off the top of my head, I don't know,
Approximately.
but let's say 20.
How many complaints?
I've received,
I can address that question.
I've
if you would
received
like
this
for me
week
to.
letter from Commissioner Clark.
We have
Official
right
complaint,
now
and
in the code database,
I've had
37
calls
cases.
as well. You know.
Sharon, I was just trying to, kind of, as Tony said, there's going to be complaints on code officials, no matter what. Every code official we have. We've had 20-something calls, and we've had one documented, 3, if you count the commissioners. I don't know what we're supposed to get out of this. We're producing credentials. I'm trying to figure out I'm trying to get facts. Where are we trying to get to?
Well, if I can finish my thought before Mr. Armstrong interrupted, I was not requesting any kind of special treatment for the Pattersons. What I was asking you to look at was their history with this town, and their circumstances was what needed to be given so special treatment or deference. We have a woman, it's not a life safety issue, and the fact that the life safety issue came when she was told she had 10 days to leave, where she's the primary caregiver for her father and her disabled sister. Get out, you have 10 days. That's where discretion and compassion needed to be had. That was my point.
Well, listening to her when she addressed the group here, she said she had a room in the house.
Yes, she does.
Okay, so, here's the thing.
It's a she said.
Just a second.
Sorry.
Here's the thing. We either have a code and we enforce it, or we don't have a code. We can't make individuals exceptions especially about life safety issues. And running an extension cord out there, and running a shed so she can sleep in it, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, we're talking about shooting messengers here when the message is, you can't do that under our code. And it could cost you your life. It could cost the chief a trip out there to try to save them if there was an electrical short or something like that. So I don't think there's any question about this is a code violation. That's pretty cut and dry. You can't live in a shed and run electricity to it. So the fact that she doesn't live there all the time, Carolyn, is not the point. The point is that she lives there enough that she's running electricity to it and cooling it, and that is a code violation. So
She also runs
wait
it,
now.
to cool it because it is a storage shed with clothes and everything else in there. It wasn't just for her circumstances of going
Carolyn,
around.
This is just a little experience that I have.
Just legally.
Yes.
We make industrial glue equipment. Oftentimes it's a far stretch, but sometimes we have customers plug those machines up on long extension cords. And you know what happens when you do that and you run something on a long extension cord? Catches on fire. And I have people call me up and they're like, hey, caught on fire. And I'm like, well, why did it catch on fire? He's like, well, I have it on a 50-foot extension cord. And I was like, well, there you go.
Yeah, that's
Problem solved.
that's dangerous.
So where do we go from here as a commission? I think there can't, look, we have legitimate complaints of the first hand, but we have to, where do we take this? We can't say, be nicer. That's not something we can enforce. I'm just trying to figure out what do
Mr.
you have a
Armstrong
recommendation?
now has credentials.
Yeah,
That's
good.
the number one thing that
That's
I have
good.
issues with is him knocking
That's
doors.
good.
And he's kind of new at this, and again, be nicer might be, that's all I can ask for. Is as citizens are coming to me, I must then share what the citizens are saying to me. It's be nicer, and then my job is done.
We wouldn't want our law enforcement officers acting that way. We would want, I think Chief Ivey would have a big problem if one of his officers approached citizens in that manner and they showed on their body cams. So I think we could at least ask that of our codes officials who are dealing with people's lives.
Mayor Gross, may I say something, please?
Go ahead.
Thank you. While I appreciate Commissioner Clark's sentiment, I would like to say that Again, I find myself in the position of someone stating something as a fact when they weren't privy to the conversation, they were not in the room, they didn't hear what was said. There was nothing aggressive about our first visit with Mr. Patterson at all. We offered to assist him. No one threatened him in any way. He voluntarily had his daughter find the key and take us out and explained it. His only comment to us the entire time is, I'd appreciate if you guys would go easy on us. That was the only thing he said to us. We don't approach people in an aggressive manner. We're not combative with people. We sit down and try to work something out. We explained to him that a letter would be coming so he wouldn't be completely taken aback, and asked his daughter's storage building if she would contact Mike to work things through. She did not place that call. The letter was written, it was entered into a public record, and while I don't like to be combative, it's simply not factual. When I spoke to Commissioner Clark, who remained behind after we met with the Pattersons in that hall, I stated that to her quite bluntly. What you stated is fact, was not a fact. The last thing I'd like to make an observation on this particular case is there was a third party involved. So while we're listening to the complaint that came in on the code line, dealing with the letter that Commissioner Patterson wrote, visiting with the Pattersons, I was also receiving emails from a third party who we then found out filed the original complaint, who was sending emails stating that she was in fear of being retaliated against. And actually during the meeting with the Pattersons, they acknowledged that they confronted the neighbor. So now there's a third party, and we were trying desperately not to escalate the situation because of the neighbor, because of the Pattersons. We then contacted assistance for Mr. Patterson. Melinda Patterson turned that assistance down. Mr. Patterson then said no, he wanted it. So things are being stated as fact that simply aren't. We documented every single interaction with the Pattersons in the code file, which is public record. You're all welcome to a copy of it. But we've never approached things that way. We don't approach things that way now. And for Commissioner Brennick, the issue that I believe you're referring to has to do with a previous case that was filed against the city, the storage of cars. We're not bothering him for the storage of cars on that lot. It's progressed to the lot next door. So I believe that Commissioner Hargis has captured it perfectly. You have codes. You either enforce them or you don't. We don't have any latitude within the book other than what we're granted.
My issue was basically no credentials, knocking on the door, being aggressive and rude towards the non-homeowner who answered the door.
Again, there's a statement being made that we're being aggressive and rude. And unless someone is witnessing us being aggressive and rude, that's the statement that is being made as fact. It simply isn't.
We're being told that. Not everyone is, I know you speak with great authority, Sharon, and you speak, in your clip sentences, but that does not make your fact, fact. If people don't remember what they say, they may not remember what you do, they will remember how you make them feel.
Well, again, Commissioner Clark, while I appreciate your sentiment, that is not what occurred during the meeting with Mr. Patterson. Melinda Patterson was not present at that meeting. She was not home.
It's what her family told her when she did get home.
We're gonna go back and forth.
Yeah,
We're gonna go back and forth. Is there,
Yeah.
really quick to tie a bow on this, is there any state? Hang on, Mr.
I think we're
Armstrong.
done.
This is being presented to you as fact. Commissioner Remick is having something presented to him as fact by people who were not present at the meeting.
No credentials were shown,
I know
so.
what I said.
All right, Mr.
Yeah, we have credentials.
Commissioner Remick is talking about, I knocked on the door, I identified myself as the
It seems to be irrelevant to what's happening right now.
All right, Josh, would you?
I do have one and I'm done. Maybe, look, as a commission and as a city, we can look into some state sensitivity or whatever that the state provides of how the codes official should approach a resident, and make sure that that information is reviewed by the town and the codes enforcement, because it's all hearsay after that.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we have no way to do it. I mean, I appreciate the fact that we're actually seeing some progress being made on codes enforcement.
I agree with that too.
I get calls about lack of code enforcement happening all the time. Actually, one of the individuals that calls me on a regular basis is looking at me right now.
He's happy. So.
Along with several others, and this has been an issue for a long time. And I mean, we've kind of fought long and hard to find codes officials that can do the job. And I think, you know, we've been through this a lot, but I don't know what I mean, this was a discussion, there was no action.
Right. I think it'd be fair to allow Ms. Clark to close this out since you brought it up.
Oh, I agree that codes need to be had. I think there's a way to carry it out. I would like something like a neighborhood action team that could come help people, but I also think that there's a way to carry things out, and I just don't think people are gonna come and make this up. And I agree with what you said about codes being enforced and some of the actions being investigated and also cleaned up. But how many of those people were mistreated or along the way? We'll never know. They didn't complain because they complied. They just complied and went along with it. And I just don't think that these people out of the blue are gonna come and contact me, and I've never met them before, and say all this to me and make it up. For what purpose? There's no purpose. They're pretty guileless when it comes to that, and they just stated how they felt and what was said. And I don't think we need to, in this body or the Armstrongs, need to again tell them that they're lying, because it's their experience, and you can't invalidate what someone experienced. It just, you know, and I think there's some other issues that maybe Martha Brooke can look into on curtilage and Fourth Amendment too, because I think there's some instances of that as well.
I mean, you have experience with this kind of thing, don't you?
I do.
I mean, you know, there's a lot of times when people are approached and told they're doing something wrong, are they usually like
I will tell
happy
you,
about that?
property codes and codes violations in general are the hardest thing to enforce, because people get really, really defensive typically when you're there on their property to tell them how to live. That's the way they perceive it. So you can be as nice as you want to be, and there's a difference in being rude and being to the point. And there's nothing wrong with being to the point, because that's what, it needs to be pretty black and white. Here's the violation, here's what we need to do to take care of it. My concern is, I think we're getting in a really, really bad spiral when commissioners start taking complaints, and instead of referring them to John, whose job it is to handle the complaints, and John investigate that with the department heads or whoever the complaint's on, that the commissioners start investigating. That's when you get a lot of he said, she said. I think it's okay to field complaints, but when you start investigating it, forming an opinion, and you only have one side of the story. And I will tell you, I've been victim of that recently with the commissioner sending me an email that did not have the facts, was completely one-sided based on what a citizen told me. And the letter was, I took the letter, I take my job really, really personal. If I screw up, I will be the first to tell you. If our officers screw up, I'll be the first to tell you. But I do not appreciate when I get accused, or our officers get accused of a situation that's absolutely not factual. And it seems the same thing is happening in this situation with the codes official. I think that if y'all get complaints, building those complaints to the city manager, or if you want to contact the department head. But I think when you start getting engaged with the citizen and basically having court over what's happening, is what, that's what it feels like, is you're having court with Pattersons, getting all the facts together to go against our codes official. We're all on the same side. And I think that, as commissioners, is a very dangerous ground. It's okay to listen to complaints, field complaints, but I don't think that as a commissioner, you should be trying to intervene in things. Simply pass them on. You'll get documentation of what happens, then it's resolved. But if you don't get the side of the other party, in this case, the city, I'm not going to respond. When you send me an email that accuses things that just absolutely aren't true, listen to one side and form an opinion, I'm not going to respond. So if that occurs, the only response I'll have is in a public meeting.
Thank you.
Do you want to respond, do you want me to respond to that?
You're welcome.
That wasn't a complaint.
Well,
It was asking a question about a call that all of us had gotten, or an email that we had all gotten. And all I do is ask, is this the correct interpretation of this? It was not an accusation, it was a very respectful letter.
the letter, I really don't want to get into the facts of the
Okay.
letter.
Okay, well,
I mean,
let's
but
not.
I will say that what you stated in the letter was simply from the citizen. It had no information from the police department, no information from the dispatch.
But that's why I sent it, because, just to make you aware, that's all it was are you
Marilyn,
aware? Are
you
aware?
quoted the ordinance, you
Yeah.
basically said, do you not understand the ordinance? It's
Oh,
like,
chief, that's not what I said. Chief,
that's,
I'm-
that, there again, like you said, the Patterson thing, that's how I think, okay, that's the way I read it and interpreted.
There's always two sides to every story, you gotta get both sides, and, we're not gonna solve all those issues here tonight, so,
But
I, for one, make a motion that we discontinue the discussion.
all right, well, we do have one final issue here, and I'm sorry, we have item I. Hi, Todd, you sure you want this?
You sure?
So what has happened is Tom Cullen has resigned from the planning commission, and I have appointed Laura Hill to serve in that position, which opens up a position on the Board of Zoning Appeals, for which Ms. Hill currently serves. And the planning commission, of course, is my appointment. The Board of Zoning Appeals is our collective appointment. And I asked Todd if he would be interested in serving on the Board of Zoning Appeals, and before he changes his mind, I would like to nominate Todd to serve on the Board of Zoning Appeals, but that would be a vote. We have a second. So all in favor? Aye. Congratulations, Todd.
Thanks.
Bring your
How can you take one of my board people off of my board?
She was just
She
so good, I had
was
to
just
steal her.
appointed the chairman of that. No.
I know, she was.
Somebody turn in my resignation.
Oh, sorry. Wait,
You can't,
Okay.
hang on.
Surplus.
Surplus, please.
Surplus.
Surplus, yes, we have our items to surplus. I'm getting ahead of my, this meeting's
Freezer out of
gone on so long that I. All right, Parks Department chest freezer to discard or sell for scrap. Do we have a motion to surplus?
motion to surplus.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Reminders, you guys can read them. City Hall's closed Monday. You guys got it. All right. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.